We continue today with the series of messages that we've been doing entitled 30 Days to Live. And again, the idea behind them is, what if we were told that we only had 30 days to live? Obviously, that would make a difference in our life. And the thought, though, is, shouldn't that just go ahead and make a difference in our life now, instead of us waiting until we are right at the end of our life? Why not just go ahead and learn those things now? Eva Moses Kaur was a Holocaust survivor. And you see her with her twin sister pictured on the bottom right. Now, she also had two older sisters, mother and a father. And being Jewish, they were taken off to a place called Auschwitz in a cattle car. And once they arrived there, they were all asked to, or forced to, get off the car onto an inspection platform, which was the place at which the Nazis would determine at that moment if they were going to live or die. If they died, they were immediately killed. And if they lived, they would live in this terrible camp. Now, there was a special interest in the twins because this Josef Mengele was a doctor that Hitler had hired to do tests on twins. Because his evil thought was, if this doctor, in his cruel testing of twins, could somehow figure out how they could produce more twins in the future, the Aryan race would be added to at a faster rate. And that was the idea behind it. So they took twins, just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of twins, and performed these awful tests on them 7 days a week. And Eva Moses Kaur was one of them. The rest of her family was killed at the inspection point, and they all no longer, are part of their life. And there's these two twins. Later on, the Soviets freed them, and then now that they're free, unfortunately, Eva's sister died a little bit later on because of the awful effects of the tests that were done on these twins. One of her kidneys was hurt. And so because of Josef Mengele, her sister died, and of course the Nazis, all of her family dies, and now she lives for the rest of her existence in this horror. But she is challenged because she sees a video, a TV show, in which a Nazi doctor, not this Josef Mengele, but another Nazi doctor, is actually confessing to his crimes and saying he was sorry. And so Eva now is challenged with the thought of, should I extend forgiveness to this awful doctor? And so she's going to talk about this in a video that I'm going to show you. And then the next question was, would she go ahead and go a further step and extend forgiveness to Josef Mengele, the very one who would harm her body day after day? Would she extend forgiveness to both of these Nazi doctors? And I want to show you just a short little video of Eva Moses Kaur.
After 10 months, one morning I woke up, and the following simple idea popped into my head. How about a letter of forgiveness from me to Dr. Munch? I knew immediately that he would like it, and that was a meaningful gift. An Auschwitz survivor gives him a letter of forgiveness to a Nazi doctor. But what I discovered for myself was life-changing. I discovered that I had the power to forgive. No one could give me that power. No one could take it away. It was all mine to use in any way I wished. And that became an interesting thing because as a victim of almost 50 years, I never thought that I had any power over my life. Now, I began writing a letter, and I didn't know how to write a letter of forgiveness. And it took me 4 months to write it. And then I thought somebody might read it, and my diction in English is good, my spelling is not. So I wanted my former English professor to correct my spelling. So I called her. We met 3 times, and third time she said to me, "Now, Eva, very nice. You forgive this Dr. Munch. Your problem is not with Dr. Munch. Your problem is with Dr. Mengele." I was not quite ready to forgive Mengele. She said to me, "Okay, I have been meeting with you, correcting your letters. Now I want you to do me a favor. When you go home tonight, pretend that Mengele is in the room and you are telling him that you forgive him. Because I want to find out how would it make you feel if you could do that." Interesting idea, I thought. And when I got home, actually, I did something else. I picked up a dictionary and wrote down 20 nasty words, which I read clear and loud to that make-believe Mengele in the room. And at the end, I said, "In spite of all that, I forgive you." Made me feel very good that I, the little guinea pig of 50 years, even had the power over the angel of death of Auschwitz. So that is the way we arrived in Auschwitz. Dr. Munch came with his son, daughter, and granddaughter. I took my son and my daughter. I read my Declaration of Amnesty, which is a very good little document. And I signed it. Dr. Munch signed his document. I felt free from Auschwitz, free from Mengele. So now that I have forgiven him, I knew that most of the survivors denounced me, and they denounce me today also. But what is my forgiveness? I like it. It is an act of self-healing, self-liberation, self-empowerment. All victims, all hurt, feel hopeless, feel helpless, feel powerless. I want everybody to remember that we cannot change what happened. That is the tragic part. But we can change how we relate to it.
So that was a story of two sisters. I want to tell you another story of 2 sisters. There was a man who I was listening to share a message, a minister, the other day, and he mentioned in this message that earlier on in his career, he had the opportunity to speak to a group of people that he'd never spoken to before. And as he started the message, he looked to his right, and as he describes it, there was the meanest, maddest-looking woman that he had ever seen in his life. And it actually unnerved him as a speaker to see this woman. And so he said, "I can't look this way anymore." And so he turns this way, and he sees almost like an identical person who looked every bit as mad and every bit as mean. And he was like, where am I going to look? So he looks straight down the aisle for the rest of the message. And afterwards he asks one of the leaders, "Who are these 2 women that look so mean?" And he said, "They are identical twins. They are sisters who have been mad at each other for 23 years. And then the minister said, "Well, why won't they just forgive and get it over with?" And the leader said, "Because both of them say they would forgive, but the other one hasn't asked for it." I want to talk to you about a bag of garbage, which actually this is not garbage. I would not risk that, because who would want to bring a bag of garbage into church? Especially if it had liquid in it, and in my clumsiness, I poke a hole in it, and it I'd be like on monster.com looking for another job or whatever it is. Unforgiveness is like somebody bringing a bag of trash and putting it on your front porch, and you taking hold of that garbage, and instead of properly disposing of it to get rid of it, you decide you're just going to carry it around every day to work, at the family table, to church. Everywhere you go, you carry a bag of relational garbage, of hurt. And along the way, throughout the days, you also gather other bags. And so everywhere you go, you have bags of trash that you carry around with you. And so someone says, why don't you get rid of that trash? And you say, because they never said they're sorry. Never asked for it back, so I'm just going to carry it around with me. Jesus is the model of forgiveness. In Luke chapter 23, verse 34, as he literally is hanging from the cross, Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. He's talking about men, soldiers, who had just finished putting him on the cross, nailing spikes into his hands, into his feet. And as he is there in agony and pain, he looks down and he says, forgive them, or I forgive you. Had they asked for it? No. Did Jesus give it? Yes. Not only had they just finished hanging him on the cross, but then disrespected him by gambling for his clothing. They're gambling for whatever he has left on this earth. Who knows? Sandals, his outer garment. They're gambling for his clothes. Now, they would still, of course, have to ask for forgiveness themselves, but Jesus is saying, as far as it depends on me, I'm letting this go. Relationally, I'm forgiving them. Why? Why did he model forgiveness? Well, obviously, it's the best way to live. And obviously, if you're going to be well-adjusted in life, you must forgive. And obviously, if you want to live in the present and not the past, you have to forgive. And can you imagine the Son of God going into that grave holding a bag of trash? And then when he resurrects again, holding a bag of trash of unforgiveness. But I'll tell you why else. Because there's power in that garbage. There's power in this garbage. There's power for it to stick to you every moment of every day and get involved in potentially every conversation and every attitude and every moment that you live. There's power in this bag of trash. And Jesus also knew this. He knew that the destination of the garbage determines the condition of your heart. We have three choices when it comes to forgiveness. We can hold on to it. And if we hold on to it, it says everything about the condition of our bitter heart. Or we can throw it at the person who hurt us. And if we throw it back at them, it says everything about the condition of our heart. Because you never really release yourself from it just because you think you throw it at the person. You're just keeping the whole thing in circulation. You're continuing to stay attached to it. Or you can go to a spiritual place of forgiveness that starts off like a heap of trash, like a garbage dump, and you can, with the power and the strength of God, throw that thing onto the relational garbage dump, and then you can walk away and leave it. Oh, it's hard. It's nearly impossible. It may take you 2 or 3 times of walking to that dump till you actually can let go of it. I know. I've had to do it. But it can be done. Why? Because Jesus, the author of forgiveness, did it and lives inside of us as believers. I want to tell you the story of a lady at the casket. I preached a message, a funeral message, and at the end of the funeral, the crowd filed out as they always do, and it left the immediate family as is the custom, and it's just myself and the workers of the funeral home, and then the immediate family and this man in a casket. And as is the custom, one by one, the immediate family, they come up and they spend a moment. And as a pastor, it's just part of what we do, that we stand at the foot of the casket just for support. We're there. But because of the closeness of our proximity, we hear stuff. And so everyone's going through their normal goodbyes and talks. And then the last one is the daughter of the man who's in the casket. And she comes up, and now by this time she is wailing. I mean, the tears are uncontrollable. And she says quite audibly, "I forgive you, Dad. Would you forgive me?" And she said it more than once, great tears. "I forgive you, Dad. Would you forgive me?" And it was pitiful and wonderful. Wonderful because she was saying, I'm getting rid of the garbage that I've been holding. Pitiful because she hadn't done it earlier when Dad was still alive. My prayer is that Dad didn't go to the casket not having done so. Because the truth is that when we do that, we will stand before Jesus holding our bag of trash. And among the conversation, there might be something like, "What's with the trash?" "Oh, well, You know, and just to be perfectly honest with you, while there are huge, nearly impossible things it seems to forgive, there are many things that are rather trivial in comparison to God and the eternity and what God has forgiven you and I for. I'm holding this trash because so-and-so looked at me wrong on Sunday morning 3 years ago. And I've just never liked them. And from that day on, I've just not really forgiven them for that. I'm holding this bag of trash because I did a lot of work for so-and-so never once said thank you. Okay. Jesus, on more than one occasion, including the Lord's Prayer, refers to the fact that God forgives us in direct correlation with how we forgive others. Because there's something insincere about a person's request to be forgiven from God if that person cannot forgive somebody else. There's something not quite right about that. It's sort of like robbing a bank like every month, and during one of the bank robberies, you say, "Oh, God, forgive me." And yet you do it again like the next week. Something insincere about that. This is a big deal. Why does it come up in the 30-day thing? Because the authors of the book, both are ministers, and both, like me, have experienced many occasions when a person is near death that they decide to get serious about not holding the trash any longer. Eva Moses Kaur, if I could quote as I close. If I could quote from that video, she says, "What I discovered for myself was life-changing. I discovered that I had the power to forgive. No one could give me that power, and no one could take it away. It was all mine to use in any way that I wished. As a victim of almost 50 years, I never thought I had any power over my life. We cannot change what happened, but we can change how we relate to it. We can change. We can decide if we carry it. This isn't necessarily about the person even receiving your forgiveness. They might not. They might not ever be to the point in their life where they really, frankly, are a big enough person to be able to do that or to accept it. It's not about that. It could be about that. It could be about amazing, grace-filled moments of restoration. It's not about getting to the point where now all of a sudden everything is just like it used to be with that person, because oftentimes it'll never be like it used to be. And that's the way it is. What this is about is you discontinuing the thought of carrying it around day after day in your life. You letting it go, if no other reason, then you are no longer tied to that person and that situation. You choose not to hold on or to throw it back, but you take a spiritual hike to the garbage dump of hurt, and you toss it up there with all of God's might, and then you come back. There will be times that you find yourself creeping back toward it, and you just need to be reminded, and God will say, well, come on back. come on back. Leave it there. So the story we talked about during the offering is this man named John, an atheist who comes to faith. And I just think it's interesting because one of the struggles that people who do not believe that there was a God, one of the struggles that you have in that whole thing is not only, how does all of this complicated world get here when there was nothing to begin with? But another struggle is, how are there intense, real feelings like love? How does that work into the whole evolutionary thing? But beyond that, in correlation with this message, is how is it that one named Eva Cor Moses could actually find it in her heart to forgive if there was not a God who is all about the same thing? So I close with that because I want to say, you and I, remember all these messages are you and I. You and I can do this. Oh, I know there's some twisted misconception that there's power in holding the garbage, and yet do we not see how ridiculous it is to carry that garbage around with us? Does it not affect our children and our grandchildren? Does it not affect our witness at work? Does it not bring us down? Does it not chain us up to that event and cause us to live in the past? But oh, it can be done. Started mine one day. I had received a letter with barbs in it. Not people named Barb, I mean like barbs. It was very hurtful. And it just piled on top of other stuff. And I had to make, for me it's physical, I had to make some physical steps. And I knew I could not keep that letter in my house, along with asking God to, help me to have a heart. Which, by the way, the Lord's Prayer is wonderful at this, because the Lord's Prayer every single day says, help me to forgive as you've forgiven me. But I have this letter. I didn't want to put it in my trash because even that was too close. And so I get in my car and I go looking for a garbage dump. I don't know where to find a garbage dump. And then I think, there's like these thoughts of if you put trash in someone's dump, they're going to go through the trash and it's going to end up back on, your yard and all this. And so I'm driving around looking for a garbage dump or can, hopper, whatever. And so after about 3, I found the right one. And I creaked open that thing. And I threw that letter into the trash. And I shut that metal lid down with the crash. And I went back in the car and I just sat and I said, help me, God, now. I don't want to keep this. I don't want to throw it back at the person. Help me, God, to leave it in the trash. And it took a little while. But God honored that prayer. And that letter, and that situation, and that hurt while things will never be the same, just perfect, it is no longer bondage for me. So my challenge to you is look at your heart today, because the God of heaven is looking right now. Look at your heart, and is there a moment, is there a person, is there a situation that right now comes to your mind that you need to decide, am I going to continue to just clutch onto that? Am I going to, in anger, throw it back at them? Or with God's help today, am I going to start to ask for His grace to find a dumpster and let it go? Would you bow your heads in prayer with me? "30 days to live," God. If we were told that, surely, hopefully, these things would come to mind. Am I going to stand before the God of heaven holding a bag of trash because they never asked for forgiveness, or because they don't deserve forgiveness? Am I going to have the conversation in which Jesus then says, "Oh, and you did deserve forgiveness? Oh, remind me how that went. Remind me how that goes. Not just once, but thousands of times you sinned. Remind me how that goes. That they don't deserve forgiveness, but you do." Let's talk about that. And oh God, that's not the conversation that we want to have on that day. And for our own sake, and for our family's sake, and for our witness, and for everything else, God, give us the strength first to ask for it. And secondly, starting today to begin, however this works, to be very intentional now about letting it go and throwing it on the garbage heap. Give us the power in the blessed name of the one who forgives, Jesus. Amen.